Did you know, as an IEP parent, that you have federally guaranteed rights in the IEP process? Do you know what those rights are? Many parents don't. Hi, I'm Lisa Leitner, and I'm a special education advocate for over 15 years, and I'm also actually the author of Your IEP Playbook. So definitely pick that up wherever books are sold. Parental rights, you have them. They are in IDEA. They come in this really boring booklet called Procedural Safeguards. Procedural safeguards is a clunky term. It's not interesting. It's not sexy. It's not anything. If you see a booklet laying on a desk that says, procedural safeguards, it's not like, oh, I got to pick that up and read it. But yeah, you got to read it because those are your parental rights. The school district is required to ensure that you have access to them at least once a year. They should be having you sign a sheet most of the time, and this happens at IEP meetings that they stick a sheet in front of you and say, "This is to you're going to sign this. This is an acknowledgement that you've read your procedural safeguards." Once you sign that sheet and you are signing that you've read them, it's kind of saying that you also acknowledge that you've been given your rights. So whenever I tell parents something that's in procedural safeguards, that's a really cool thing, which I'm going to get to in a minute. When I tell them about that, they're like, well, why didn't they tell me? Like, why didn't the school tell me that this was happening or that I could do this? Because they did. Once they have you sign that sheet that you've received your procedural safeguards, they have fulfilled their legal obligation. Of course, best practice would be to have a webinar, have, a parent meeting once a year or something like that, have a training on it. They're not obligated to do what is best practice. They're obligated, to do what they're legally obligated to do, and that is to provide you with access to these IEP procedural safeguards once a year. So then it's on you to read them. Most procedural safeguard booklets that I've seen, and each state should have their own, they've about, I'm going to say 50 to 70 pages. Pennsylvania's are written in a very small font. It's very clunky language. It's a lot of acronyms like you find in the IEP process. And it's, in other words, it's not easy reading. What I recommend to parents is, hey, bathroom reading. Like, I know that sounds gross, but, read a page here and there. Maybe put a copy in your car, in your tote bag, in your purse, your diaper bag, whatever it is that you use to carry things around. And, as you're waiting at health appointments, doctor's appointments, as you're waiting at sports practices, things like that. Like, just get through a section at a time, day by day, week by week, and you will get through them because it's essential that you get through them. The main concept or the main parental right that I find with parents, and it happens in crisis mode, is the discipline portion. And in your procedural safeguards, it is defined as far as what the school's responsibilities are to do if your child has been suspended 1 time, 10 times, on and on and on, how many days they've been suspended. That is when I find most parents actually like look for their procedural safeguards and read them. And that is not the time that you want to be trying to digest this information because, again, it's clunky language, it's government language. And when your child is in the middle of a crisis and being repeatedly suspended or perhaps even arrested, that is not the time that you want to start understanding your rights. You want to have at least have a foundation of knowledge before that happens, and hopefully be preventing that from happening. But again, it outlines the thresholds for suspensions. It also talks about manifestation determination reviews, which is to look at the behavior and determine if that behavior, that suspension worthy behavior, if it was a manifestation of the child's disability and what you're supposed to do in those instances. So again, it's very important that you read this, particularly if your child, has a behavior plan and has already been in school referrals and discipline referrals and things like that. You want to know these things before an extreme crisis hits. I also want parents to understand in the discipline portion. Yes, it sets the procedural safeguards states specific timelines as far as 10 days consecutive cumulative days, as far as suspension and all that. It also says or when a pattern is developing. So make sure, again, read that section over and over, because as an advocate with my clients, I request a manifestation determination review for my clients every time they get suspended, because we don't want punitive action. Suspensions don't work. I mean, I guess I could get into this is like another video for another day talking about suspensions and discipline, but it's relevant here. Suspensions don't work. They don't work to fix behavior. They're punitive. They're not supportive and all that. So I at least make sure that we get it documented that we have requested a manifestation determination review. Many times the schools decline it. Sometimes we cite the procedural safeguards and it says, or when a pattern begins to develop, and we might say, well, you've suspended the kid 3 times the past month. That sounds like a pattern developing to me. And then again, for the school long term, if you think about, should you find yourself in due process, it's not going to look good for them if you asked for manifestation reviews and you didn't get them. So the discipline portion is important. Please read the discipline portion, again, particularly if your child has behaviors. Schools are overwhelmed right now and they're under-resourced and they're just reacting and kind of like shoving kids out the door. Like, you're going home, you're suspended, this, that, the other thing, because they don't have the resources to properly support our kids. So you're going to have to force that issue. The second, or what I think is the most important right in procedural safeguards for parents is something called the PWN. Another acronym, another clunky term, which stands for prior written notice. As far as I know, I live in Pennsylvania. As far as I know, Pennsylvania is the only state that has renamed the PWN. We don't call it a PWN here. We call it a NOREP. So if you're watching this and you're a Pennsylvania person, I'm talking about your NOREP. For everyone else, I do believe every other state calls it the PWN. What the PWN is or does is that it requires the school district, prior to making any change to your child's IEP, any change, they are required to provide you with prior written notice of this change. Now, prior written notice, that word prior kind of slips people up. That doesn't mean that they have to notify you of this change prior to an IEP meeting. It is still completely legal for them to come into an IEP meeting and blindside you with like a different placement or removal of the IEP. Like, I've had that happen to parents and things like that. They're legally permitted. It's not best practice, of course, but they are legally permitted to completely blindside you in an IEP meeting with drastic changes. Not required to provide it prior to the meeting. They are required to provide it prior to the change. So they can come into a meeting and suggest these drastic changes, such as, oh, well, we're going to, we don't think he needs services anymore. We're going to move him to a 504. That has to be provided to you in writing. And if you read your procedural safeguards, you will see that there are 6 different things, 6 different boxes that they have to fill out, or 6 different questions that they have to answer in writing to make, prior to making this change, such as, what other options were considered? What data did they use to determine that this change was needed, and so on and so on. The reason that this is so essential for parents to understand and embrace your prior written notice rights and understand this concept is I find in an IEP meeting, parents are told no all the time and they don't really understand it because it doesn't always feel like a no. So you ask for something and you're told, well, let's just try this, or let's just try that, or let's just wait and see, or let's go with this plan for 6 months and then, we'll after the holidays we'll look at it. So essentially you were just told no. When you're sitting in a meeting and you are surrounded by 6 or 8 of your coworkers who support you, it is very easy to look a parent in the eye and tell them no softly, wait and see. Let's try this first. You've just been told no. It's just a softer no. What is much more difficult is to put it in writing on this prior written notice form and list all the things that IDEA requires that they address, those 6 questions. Because you have to be able to demonstrate on paper that this change was necessary. And if it's something significant like removing an IEP and they haven't done any testing, which, believe it or not, happens quite often, or his grades are fine now, we think he's fine. No, that's not how it works. So please read the section on prior written notice. Now, I'm already at over 11 minutes, and I know you all, 10 minutes is kind of like the sweet spot for YouTube videos. So there are many other sections to the procedural safeguards. Like I said, it's a big clunky booklet with a small font and unfamiliar words. Please try to work through it a page at a time, a section at a time. In the back, there should be a list of agencies that you can turn to if you need assistance, including your state agencies, advocacy agencies, things like that. You can always visit adayinourshoes.com, and I will have that information. It also tells you your complaint options and the procedures. Now, I want to say a word about those complaint options and complaint procedures, because in my professional opinion, when I see what's written in procedural safeguards as far as your complaint options, and then you look online, it looks oversimplified. So, for example, if you disagree with this IEP, like let's say they want to remove the IEP, right? And you disagree with that decision, so you want to file for due process to keep the IEP. Sometimes parents, that's their watershed moment, right? Where they go, remove the IEP. I don't want that. I need to figure this out. They go and they look at well, hey, they gave me that booklet. Maybe I should check it out. They check out the booklet. They go to the website. And if you go, at least I know in Pennsylvania's, if you go to Pennsylvania's website for due process for parents, it's like this online form, and it's so oversimplified. And let me explain, because the form is, name, address, child, whatever, and then it says reason for complaint, and it's just this online form, and a lot of parents think oh, well, all I have to do is fill out this online form and we'll start this process. What they don't understand is at the other end, the school district is going to have their attorneys, many of them, and well-trained, experienced attorneys who fight these complaints all day, every day for a living. When an attorney prepares a due process complaint, it's this thick. It's not just an online form. It's data and documentation, and it's citation of previous precedent and stuff like that. It looks like it's this easy thing, and it's not, because it's just due process has just grown into this big litigious process. And chances are, if you go into it without an attorney, you will lose. So I'm not saying don't ever do it. I'm saying please be aware that what it says in the booklet and what it says online again, oversimplifies it, makes it look like, oh, all I have to do is fill out this online form and we'll have this dispute resolution hearing and all that. No, it's like a real hearing with the hearing officer, and they're going to have attorneys and they're going to have expert witnesses testifying as to why your child doesn't need an IEP anymore and things like that. So those are the things you need to be aware of. I guess that's it. I will stop there. Please read your procedural safeguards so that you understand your parental rights. Independent education evaluations is in there, and that's a big one. See, I could talk about this for hours. A big mistake that parents don't understand is that you do not have the right. This is an urban legend that makes me crazy that floats around in parent groups. You do not have the right to an independent education evaluation. You have the right to request one. But here's the catch. If you request one, the school is obligated, this is in IDEA. If the school is going to deny you that IEE, they are required to file for due process to defend their evaluation. So what happens is that parents mistakenly think, oh, I have a right to an IEE, so here we go, I'm going to request one. And they request one, and a few days later in the mail, they get this notice that the school's filed due process against them. Well, they're legally, again, school districts are legally required to file for due process to defend their evaluations if they're going to deny you one. That's also in your procedural safeguards. So, okay. Now I'm at over 15 minutes. I want to stop. I will put links down below about your parental rights. I will put links. I have a copy of the federal ones, the IDEA procedural safeguards. I will put a link to those down below so that you can look at them. Please, though, look up your state's procedural safeguards because, again, education is leave it up to the states. It always has been. IDEA has always left implementation of IEPs up to the states. So you want to know what your state says about procedural safeguards. There may be little things in there, different timelines. Some states, when it comes to mediation, they allow attorneys, some do not, and things like that. So you want to be clear on what it is for your state because that matters. Hey, give me a like, give me a subscribe, check out my book, Your IEP Playbook, again, wherever books are sold. You can always visit adayinourshoes.com for more information. And remember that, hey, I'm here. I have the website, I have online training, I have the YouTube channel. You can find me anywhere. Subscribe to my email. I will put that down below as well. Have a great day.